The General Motors turbo-hydromatic 700R4 transmission was introduced in 1982. Because of its low first-gear ratio, 3.04 to 1, it was found in trucks, then C-body vehicles, Camaros, Firebirds, and finally the Corvette. Hello, I'm Bob Mayer. Since its introduction, the 700R4 has had many major parts changes, and care must be taken on interchangeability. This ATSG program will cover the teardown, inspection, measurement, and assembly of this unit, the GM 700R4. With the many changes in this unit, we have the latest update showing the parts, part numbers, and interchangeability. Bob Cherney, instructor in our shop, will take us through the unit. Bob?
During the teardown and processing of the 700R4 transmission, we will be using the Kent-Moore transmission holding fixture, servo end play gauge, pump puller, and output shaft support. Due to the limited time on this video, we will be removing several of the bolts and fasteners off camera. First, remove the snap ring from the case, then the servo cover, and the 2/4 servo piston and pin. Then remove the pan, take off the filter, the TCC solenoid, the wire harness and connector. Remove the 3/4 accumulator cover, piston and spring, the valve body, check balls, the separator plate, check balls that are in the case, and the 1/2 accumulator spring and piston. Remove the governor cover and the governor assembly. Remove extension housing, speedometer gear, and install output shaft support. Remove the O-ring from the turbine shaft. With the filter and solenoid removed, we can now pull the pump from the case. When using the pump puller, be sure it has a flat end on the threaded portion. If it's pointed, install a coin between the point and the shaft to prevent damage to the check ball capsule in the end of the turbine shaft. Remove the reverse drum and the input housing. Take out the 2/4 band and the 2/4 anchor plug. Remove the input sun gear, the snap ring, the input ring gear and planetary carrier, and finally the sun gear shell itself. Remove case snap ring and reach in. Take out the low reverse support, take out the rear planetary and output shaft. The low reverse clutches will come with it. And the last part to be removed will be the low reverse piston, snap ring, and retainer.
The automatic transmissions of today are not as forgiving. Inspection and measurement checks are critical. Here's Bob with a few tips.
With the transmission disassembled, now we inspect the parts to see which ones warrant replacement. Carefully check the planetary gear sets for wear. Both the input planetary and rear planetary should have batwing washers. Look at the ring gears. Also check them for wear, which could create a noise problem. On the output ring gear, be sure to use the one that has an ID mark running from the front to the rear of every fifth tooth. On the reverse input drum, check the drum surface for band wear. Also, with a straight edge, check the surface for distortion. Look at the piston and make sure there aren't any cracks. Visually check the input housing turbine shaft for cracks. Use an air check to be sure that the 3/4 check ball is seating and sealing properly. Holding the forward clutch in the left hand, the overrun clutch hub should freewheel clockwise and lock counterclockwise. To prevent front seal pop-out, use pump seal retainer part number 8654-491. Check the pump body for wear, the slide, the rotor, the rings, and look at the vanes. Check for wear, especially where they contact the rings. Checking for proper servo pin length, we place the pin into the servo gauge. Then we install the servo gauge into the servo fixture. We place the whole assembly into the case, and to secure the fixture, we will install the servo cover snap ring. Install a torque wrench on the end play fixture. Then carefully put a load of 100 inch-pounds. If the white line is visible in the hole in the fixture, you then have the proper length servo pin. Using the pump puller with the adapter, install your dial indicator and perform the end play check. 5 to 36 thousandths is the allowable end play. Remember that the selective washer is located on the input housing under the thrust washer. Improper assembly could cause a noise and eventual failure. You may notice what appears to be excessive end play on the reverse drum. 140 to 170 thousandths is normal.
Now, we told you that the 700R4 has had some major changes. Here they are, along with their part numbers. The input housing has a new check ball capsule assembly, the turbine shaft has been beefed up in the sealing ring area, and the bushing journal below the spline. The splines have been changed from 200 to a 350 type. The pump body and pump cover have been changed. They can be interchanged now as complete assemblies. As components, they are not interchangeable. However, if you plug this hole on the late cover, it will retrofit to the early pump body. The only reverse ring gear to be used is the 8654-161, which can be identified with grooves running front to back on every fifth tooth. The planetary carriers with the batwing washer, 8654-132, or the 8654-200 carrier with the oil deflector. The rear gear support, 8654-197, must be used with the oil deflector type carrier for clearance. For complaints of converter shudder or earlier lockup in third gear, install the 8642-970 torque converter clutch throttle valve, spring and bushing. Now, this was originally designed for use with a diesel engine, but if you're working with a gas engine, cut one coil off the spring in the kit. For diesel models, just use as is. Results will be that the converter clutch will lock up only at speeds over 42 miles per hour in fourth gear. Now, we're providing a lot of facts and figures and new numbers in this program, but don't worry, you're not expected to remember everything. If you've got a problem, everything we're going over is included in the service manual provided with this videotape. Let's go back to Bob now in the shop.
During assembly, we will have to replace the seals and gaskets. Quality seal use is most important. Trans-Tech kits offer the best quality along with being the most complete. This kit contains the metal-clad seals, Teflon and metal sealing rings, and the most updated gaskets for this model transmission. We recommend their use. After assembling the low reverse piston in the case, install the output shaft and planetary gear set. There are 5 clutch packs in this transmission. The use of quality clutches is important for both durability and reliability. Raymark Raybestos plates are OEM and available as an aftermarket replacement. Late version plates are identified by grooves in the lining. Clutch thicknesses vary between late and early forward clutch packs. Be sure to check clutch end plate. Check for the Raybestos logo. Then you know you're using the best. Install a low support retainer, the low reverse support, and snap ring into the case. Install sun gear shell with thrust washer, reactor shaft and planetary gear set, and finally the snap ring. Install 2 4-band anchor pin in case. Then place the 2 4-band in position. Assemble the input housing and install the Sprague assembly. Then install the reverse input drum on top of the input housing and put the 2 components together into the case. Place the pump gasket in the case, being sure to line up all the pump passages. Then take the front pump assembly and, using a drift pin or a Phillips screwdriver, line up the bolt holes in the case. Remove output shaft support. Install speedometer drive gear and extension housing. Install the governor and governor cover. It's a good idea to put some Loctite sealer on the governor cover before driving it into the case. Then use a 350 type of locking device to maintain the cover in the case. Install servo piston assembly, servo cover with a new seal, and snap ring. Put the check balls in their proper location in the case. We recommend that the number 10 check ball be left out. Then install the 1 to 2 accumulator piston, pin, and spring. Remember, the spring always faces towards the separator plate. Install 3/4 accumulator, piston, spring, and cover, then the TCC solenoid. To hold check balls in place in valve body, apply grease. Then install valve body on case. Install wire harness, routing it around case bolts, into wire clips, and finally into case connector. Then take filter, install 2 O-rings, a little grease on the standpipe, place that in the case bore. Then take the pan gasket, position it on the case, and finally we install the bottom pan.
When assembling this unit, the TH700R4, there are some key things to remember. Let's review them. The overrun clutch assembly on V6 models must use the forward clutch apply plate 8642-711. Now, the wrong stack-up could cause a lock-up on the 3/4 shift. Check with page 89 in the manual you've been provided with. For air check of the overrun, forward clutch, 3/4 clutch, and reverse input clutch, see page 96 in the manual. And remember, the selective washer is installed under the thrust bearing.
If you're building a unit for exchange, be sure to match the switches and wiring harness with those of the transmission you are taking out. After installing the transmission in the vehicle, make the proper TV adjustment. That's it from the shop. Back to you, Bob.
So, that's it. Transmission work isn't easy, we all know that, but you can be a lot more efficient with the proper knowledge. This ATSG program has been designed to bring you the latest information and procedures when processing one of these units, the GM TH700R4, in your shop. Additional printed information is supplied with each videotape presentation.
The General Motors THM700R4 was first introduced in 1982 and has undergone many changes, with major changes occurring in 1987. Hello, I'm Molly Turner. This program is designed to make the technician familiar with the parts changes along with their interchangeability. Although it was first introduced in trucks, the THM700R4 can be found in C-body cars, Camaros, Firebirds, and Corvettes. It's important for the technician to be able to identify the model years for both parts interchange and converter applications. The complaints of drivability, durability, and reliability led to the many changes. To hear the most frequent driver complaints, Stevie Knox, our service writer, will fill us in. Stevie?
Molly, there are times that driver complaints of transmission problems are actually caused by some other component. We want to stress that with the computer management of vehicle functions, the technicians must be able to confine the complaint to the proper component. The 700R4 complaints most often made are no movement in D4 only, no reverse, no forward, no fourth gear. Let's go to our shop, and Dale England, our field service consultant, will tell the cause and the correction for these driver complaints. Dale, I understand there have been many updates on the 700R4 with some major ones starting in 1987. How about filling us in?
Sure, Stevie. The problem for no movement in the D4 position only is usually related to the input sprag. You'll notice on the right is the input sprag out of the 1987 model, and this sprag has been updated and enlarged from 26 elements to 28 elements for a much greater torque carrying capacity. The sprag out of the 1987 model will retrofit all the way back to 1982, but you must remember to leave out the black thrust washer that goes on top of the input carrier. For 1987, that washer was removed, and you can see that they didn't even drill the holes for the tabs on the washer. Remember, the Sprague will retrofit all the way back to 82, but do not use the black thrust washer. With the addition of the auxiliary valve body in 1987, they removed the number 5 check ball that's normally in the bathtub in the valve body here. If you install the number 5 check ball in the 87-700 with the auxiliary valve body, the low reverse clutch will last approximately 15 minutes of normal vehicle operation. There has been a change in the reverse input housing on the 1987 700R4. The first thing that we notice is that the ball capsule that was in the 82 through 86 has been eliminated. In its place, they have put the aluminum feed bleed type piston with the air bleed drilled through the piston. For premature reverse input clutch failure on the 87 700, we want to plug this hole from the back side with an Allen head type set screw, making sure that it's flush with the back of the piston, and 180 degrees from there we see another hole that's started but not drilled completely through. We want to drill through that hole with a 1/16 inch drill bit and make sure that we make the surface on the other side flush so that our wave plate will seal off against the piston. For premature forward clutch failure on the 1987 700, the problem is normally in the auxiliary valve body. The auxiliary valve body incorporates the forward clutch accumulator. Our concern is the hole that's in the end of the cover. As you can see, this cover has an oblong hole in the center and is okay to use. If you discover one with a round hole in the center, the problem has been the auxiliary valve body's inability to retain the pin for the forward clutch accumulator, and it moves out through the hole in the center of the cover. The fix is to braze the hole shut and come off center and drill an 1/8 inch hole so that we exhaust the oil that happens to get by the seal. In addition to that, the auxiliary valve body has a check ball in it for the forward clutch apply. If this check ball is left out, we'll have an extremely harsh engagement from park to drive. For no fourth gear on any 700R4, we have a problem with 2 cup plugs. First one being right here in the valve body, which faces the same direction as our TV plunger. The second one being in the 3/4 accumulator bore in the case. And those are just the common complaints. Here are the additional 1987 changes. We all know now that the auxiliary valve body was added in 1987, but there was approximately 1 month's production that did not have an auxiliary valve body. When the auxiliary valve body was added, the pan had to be made 1 millimeter deeper. That means we have to know how to identify the deeper pan. If you look at the legs around the corners of the magnet, you'll notice one short set of legs. That identifies this pan as the pan for the auxiliary valve body. The first of 3 changes on the case was the dam added to the worm track area. With the addition of the auxiliary valve body, we also had to add a pipe that runs from the auxiliary valve body up to and through the case, which was the second change in the case, and into the pump. The third change on the case was the orificed cup plug that was put in by the governor that carries governor oil and lubricates the extension housing bushing. With the addition of the oil dam to the case, obviously the valve body gaskets and spacer plate are unique to the 1987 model. The spacer plate can be readily identified because the code letter will always be preceded by the letter A. The 1987 pump body, as you can see, has a 10-vane rotor instead of the previous 7. In addition, the hole for the forward clutch feed pipe has been relocated and is at a different angle than the previous cover. In addition to that, the reverse input feed hole has been enlarged. With the introduction of the 1987 700, the previous design scarf cut rings were replaced with solid Teflon rings. There is now a resizing and installation tool available from TransTool under part number T1574. In addition to the turbine shaft rings, there are some other changes that we need to know about. First, the 1982 through 86 input housing had the forward clutch orifice inside the turbine shaft. For 1987, the orifice was removed from the turbine shaft and installed in the auxiliary valve body. That makes these housings non-interchangeable. If you were to put the 82 through 86 into a 1987, you would have 2 orifices for the forward clutch and the possibility of a delayed engagement, and forward clutch durability would probably be destroyed. If you were to put the 1987 housing into an 82 through 86, you would have no orifice for the forward clutch, and you would have an extremely harsh garage shift from park to drive. In addition, there was one other change that took place in February of 1987, in that the input housing grew 2 millimeters longer. From this picture, it looks like it grew longer on the top, but in reality, it grew longer on the other end with the addition of the stepped 3/4 apply package. With the addition of the 3/4 apply package, the splines on the input ring gear were made longer on the 87 model than they were the 82 through 86. The longer splines were to match the longer contour of the input housing. The 1987 input ring gear will fit 82 through 86, but you cannot use the 82 through 86 on the 1987 model with the 3/4 apply package. The low roller clutch also changed on the 1987 700 in that the rollers were made 150 thousandths longer. The cage was modified to accept the longer rollers, and the entire housing was modified to accept the cage. The entire assembly will retrofit back to 1982 and is highly recommended. The inner race did not change. Some 1987 Model 700s came equipped with a vehicle speed sensor. This made a change on the output shaft necessary from the familiar plastic speedometer drive gear to the speed rotor. For 1987 C trucks, there has been a speed sensor added to supply the ECM with a very accurate speed signal. The reason was to provide anti-skid braking for these models. The speed sensor, however, requires a rotor on the output shaft instead of the familiar speedometer gear and is pressed in place and requires a puller for removal. The driven speedometer gear normally tossed lube oil to the extension housing bushing. So, with the addition of the rotor, lube oil for the extension housing bushing is now provided by an orificed cup plug added to the case and sprays governor oil to the bushing. If this cup plug blows out, the result will be no upshift.
Ray Bestos Frictions. When you do the math, we move the world. Powertrain engineers the world over have one very important thing in common. When they decide which components will go into their vehicles, they're careful to pick only the best. And their choice can be your choice too. Ray Bestos, the friction's as tough as the world's toughest critics. When you do the addition, we move the world.
Stevie, with all of the many changes and updates, we can't help but wonder what would happen if there were a mismatch of the parts, and how would the technician know there was a problem?
Molly, when this occurs, the problem shows up when the technician road tests the vehicle after transmission repairs. For example, harsh or delayed engagement, no reverse, harsh 1-2. Dale can help us with these.
For a harsh or delayed engagement, again, the input housings are not interchangeable. If you were to put the 82 through 86 model that has the forward clutch orifice into an 87, we would have a delayed engagement. If we were to put the 87 into an 82 through 86 model, we would have a harsh park to drive engagement. And remember, the 1987 valve body has the number 5 check ball eliminated. If that check ball is reinstalled in the bathtub, low reverse clutch plates will be gone in approximately 15 minutes. For 1987, the accumulator pistons and seals have also changed. In 1987, we have gone to the lathe-cut rubber type seal instead of the Teflon seal. We now have 3 identical pistons in 1987 because we now have a forward clutch accumulator. So all 3 pistons, the 1-2, 3-4, and forward clutch are all the same. There's one other change that occurred in 87 in that they made the spring for the 1-2 accumulator cone-shaped or tapered. If you look at the back of the piston, you would swear that the small end of the spring went down on the piston because it fits perfectly. It does not. If you install it this way, you'll wind up with a harsh 1-2 shift. The proper direction for the spring is the large end towards the piston. While we're on the subject of shift feel, one of the minor changes in the 87-700 could affect shift feel the most if not checked very closely. The low reverse clutch pack became a selective clutch pack, as did the forward clutch pack, the 3-4 clutch, and the reverse input clutch. Failure to check these clutch packs for proper clearance will affect shift feel.
TransTech service means no problems. TransTech world-class OEM rebuilding kits and kit parts are backed by world-class service professionals. It's the way it has to be, your way. Wherever you are, the parts you want, on time, no excuses. TransTech, a lot more than just parts. A division of IPC.
The ATSG update manual provided with this tape will give additional information on updates and changes in this unit, the 700R4. There are a couple of points to review when processing this unit. The updated gear sets are available for replacement in earlier model units. The input planetary with the batwing washers, part number 8654-329. There are 2 styles of updated rear planetary gear sets with the batwing washers, 8654-132 and 8654-200. That comes with an oil slinger ring. When using planetary carrier 8654-200, you must use the shaft support 8654-197. A must with all planetary gear sets, late or early, is to use the late ring gear 8654-161, which has a groove running front to rear on every 5th tooth. For the complaints of early converter clutch engagement or converter lockup in third gear, use the converter clutch throttle valve package 8642970. When used with gas engine applications, clip one coil off the spring that comes in this kit. To identify the proper TCC solenoid, look at the 4 digits displayed on the top of the solenoid. These numbers are the last 4 numbers of the part number. And don't forget the additional changes. With the addition of the auxiliary valve body, the pan was made deeper. Ten-vane rotor instead of 7-vane. The hole in 86 is at a different angle for the pipe. Reverse input feed hole made larger. Input housing turbine shaft. Solid Teflon sealed. Special tool now available from Trans Tool under T1574. Input housings longer with 3/4 step-to-ply plate package. Orifice for forward clutch moved to auxiliary valve body. Non-interchangeable. Input ring gears. With 3/4 apply package, splines longer. Will retrofit, but not forward. Low roller clutch assembly. Rollers increased in length by 150 thousandths. Cage modified. Housing modified to accept cage. Inner race did not change. Orifice back of case. Orifice added and aimed to lube bushing.
For seal blowout on the 700R4, instead of set screws used to retain the seal, there is now available a seal retainer available under 8654-491 to retain the seal in the 700. Converter clutch shudder on the 700R4 is rare, but is usually due to excessive pump clearance. This can be checked with a straight edge and feeler gauge. Rotor to face clearance should be a minimum of 1/1000 and a maximum of 2/1000. Slide to face clearance should be checked with the O-ring and slide seal removed. Clearance here should be a minimum of 1/1000 and a maximum of 2.5/1000. And remember, always install updated inner and outer pump slide springs, OEM part numbers 8639-562 and 8639-563. Also, check the turbine shaft for any restriction and ensure proper operation of the ball capsule. Low line pressure or no line pressure may be caused by the pump screen or pump screen O-ring missing from the pump cover. Both must be present and in place. Some models have a cup plug in this location instead of the screen. Some things to remember for 1988 models. We know now that the 1987 spacer plate identification code was always preceded by the letter A. For 1988, the spacer plate identification code is preceded by the letter B. The spacer plate change was needed because of a change in the valve body. The 1-2 shift valve train was revised. The design changed from 4 valves and 2 bushings to 2 valves and 1 bushing. This reduces internal leakage and allows engine braking at a higher speed during a manual 2-1 downshift. The number 9 check ball is eliminated from the bathtub in the case with the revised 1-2 shift valve. If the number 9 check ball is used, again, the low reverse clutches will burn in approximately 15 minutes of normal operation. There has also been some 3/4 load release springs added to the 3/4 clutch pack to release the 3/4 clutch quicker. There are 5 assemblies and are installed between the steel plates and the input housing around the outside diameter of the 3/4 clutch pack. They will retrofit back to 1987 models only. There is also a new filter and revised seal assembly available for service that has the filter opening on the bottom instead of the top of the filter. OEM part number is 8657926 for the kit, and the revised seal part number is 8657767.
This ATSG program has been designed to bring you the latest update information to help you service and process these TH700R4 units coming through your shop.